Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Gilmore. I am the Irish American Heritage Month Committee Chair for Monroe County, also an Ancient Order of Hibernian brother. We're very excited and honored to bring you today A Siamsa, an evening of Irish entertainment. This program is normally done in our local libraries 4 times during Irish American Heritage Month, but this year we've decided to do a hybrid session. We've got 3 different locations that we're presenting to you live. And we also have people here at different places and everywhere else throughout the county, in addition to having things Zoomed and on YouTube. So to start off the program tonight, I'd like to remind everybody, this is the proclamation that was given to us, the local Irish organizations, as part of Irish American Heritage Month by Monroe County Executive Fellow and City of Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren. That was on March 2nd. It's been a whole month. It's been a great month. A lot of great programs have been going on, live, Zoom, and everything else. Very generous. The Ancient Order of Hibernians National is broadcasting this, and we appreciate that. This program tonight is, again, the Siamsa, and we've got 4 segments. The first segment will be a soda bread demonstration. The second segment is Cultus Catoriarum with traditional Irish music, followed by a historical presentation by our local author and past president of the Irish American Cultural Institute. And the final part of the segment is a live dance demonstration from Kathy Whitfield of Rinkin Ashare Dance Studios. So without really any further ado, again, all the local Irish organizations in Monroe County would like to thank you for participating and watching this program. And I'm going to turn things over to our Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians representative to do the soda bread demonstrations. We're live here from Barry's Old School Irish in Webster, New York. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Okay. Hello, I'm Sandy Maloney. And in 1980, I married Jim Foley, who actually grew up here in Webster on Dunning Avenue, very close to where we're standing tonight at Barry's. I come from a long line of state cooks and bakers, so it wasn't a far stretch that I majored in home economics education in college and began my experimenting and my fun love of recipes and recipe hunting and baking. Tonight, I've made this morning a brown soda bread. It's very dense. It's traditional Irish soda bread. It's only made with 4 ingredients. It's made with flour, baking soda, salt, and buttermilk. And this is just a 4 ingredient. But I made it in a brown format using 2 cups of wholemeal from the UK bread flour, and just 1 cup of pastry flour. In Ireland, their climate produces a soft wheat. In the United States, we have more of a hard wheat kernel. So in order to have a more traditional bread, you want to add a soft wheat. Soft wheat can be cake flour, pastry flour. This is a soft wheat, brown wholemeal. Deirdre, who's going to talk about the women in Irish history tonight, has told me several years ago that she does order her whole wheat flour from Ireland so that she gets the traditional taste and flavor that she's used to. So, but you don't have to do that. You can use all kinds of whole wheat. So this is just a very small loaf made with 2 cups of whole wheat flour and 1 cup of white, teaspoon of baking soda, teaspoon of salt, and a cup of little over a cup of buttermilk. So it's very dense. Right now, you're going to find that people have gone more to the brown soda bread recipes, and there are many, many Irish soda bread recipes. Baking soda didn't originate until 1840, and you're going to find that with the people more concerned about their health and they want to increase their fiber in their diet, brown soda bread will be made with usually an egg and more butter for a more tender crumb, baking powder as well as baking soda, and the addition of wheat germ and wheat bran, sometimes oatmeal. So there's a variety of brown soda breads. Tonight, what I'm going to demonstrate, though, is going to be a white bread. One that I've modified from Cook's Illustrated, and Cook's Illustrated I like because they do experiment and test all their recipes out. In the bowl, I have 3 cups of white flour, and I have 1 cup of pastry flour. Again, I'm mixing the hard wheat with the soft wheat of the cake flour. I've added a teaspoon and a half, which is a half a tablespoon of baking soda. And I've also, for an extra leavening agent, I've added 1.5 teaspoons, or again, that's the equivalent to a half a tablespoon of cream of tartar. I've added also half a tablespoon of salt. And to that, I am going to add 2 tablespoons of cut up butter. And I'm going to cut that in with a pastry blender.
There you go. You're welcome. And then, sir, you were asking about the Irish cream. Yeah. Did you want a 16 ounce or 60? Okay.
I've got this bowl on a pastry cloth. And I said that I come from a long line of bakers. And so this is a tradition in my family. I make sure that my children have a pastry blender and a pastry cloth. The cloth is easier for cleanup. It also absorbs the flour, so you're not adding extra flour into your pie crust, your bread, whatever. You can put it on, you can knead on it. So again, Irish soda bread is a quick bread. It's not made with yeast. It's made with leavening agent.
Wow. Every night. So have you ever gotten that with us before? No.
And I did find recently an article that talked about that the brown soda bread was more of a social class issue. So kind of it's more expensive to have the extra milling of the white flour, so that it was more expensive to make white Irish soda bread, and therefore families that were wealthier, you know, had the white soda bread. Like I said, it's not the same way as it is today. So that I want it to be well incorporated, just small chunks. Many recipes are going to call from anywhere from the 2 tablespoons that I've put in all the way to a half a cup of butter. And butter in a soda bread recipe adds extra richness, and it also creates a tender crumb. I also added 2 tablespoons of sugar to this. So again, a little extra sweetness. I don't like a lot of sweetness, but again, that amount you're going to find in recipes anywhere from the 2 tablespoons that I've used all the way up to a half a cup if you like it very sweet. One of my sisters, Amy Brennan, who came from Dublin, talked about that on Sunday, her mother would make traditional Irish soda bread during the week, but on Sunday, that's where the extra sugar, the extra butter, and I'm actually to this going to add a half a cup of currants.
Yeah, he's got a good shot.
You don't want to add the currants until after you've cut in the butter, so they're covered with some of the flour, and they'll blend in better into the bread. I like the currants or raisins. Annie even now uses cran raisins into her bread. My kids don't like it, so I don't often do this, but I'm going to pass this on to Jess, the owner of Barry, so hopefully she likes the cran raisins. To this, I'm adding anywhere from a cup and a half to a cup and 3/4 of buttermilk.
She sees attention. She's that free. Excuse me?
3-year-old and 12.
Okay.
And that quantity is going to depend on the humidity in the air, the humidity in your flour that day. So that's why you always want it available to add just a little extra if need be. And you want to stir this until it's combined. There's no or very little dry flour mixture. And then this is going to get turned out on the pastry cloth, and it's going to be kneaded just enough, maybe 5-6 turns, to become incorporated.
My parents are short.
Yeah, your grandparents.
I don't know.
My mom's.
I was gonna say, usually if the mother's involved,
And you can scrape off that extra flour and knead that in.
our kids are not visible, but I know that they did. They're all fine. It's okay. Very well needed, now.
No one is gonna find something.
You go to restaurants?
Yeah,
She's been to more places.
Well, because he was kind of during COVID, you know, we didn't,
yeah.
I mean, we do go out,
Yeah.
but when she was a week old, we started taking her out.
I can tell, our son has got a lot.
But we go, you know, we take her, we go to breakfast a lot and stuff, so.
So I'm trying to get as many of the little pieces of the dough incorporated, because it doesn't do any good to leave it on the pastry cloth, and you can kind
We weren't
of
really super.
stick those
Everything was closed, so.
currants back in. Flipping it over, you'll see that you can make a nice round mound.
Really?
And then the cross that is cut on the top.
He's leaving. Brother is done.
In the 19th century, it was considered that you were letting the devil out of your bread when you cut it open like this. It's also a way of giving thanks, and it's obviously a Christian cross. The other thing that's very practical in terms of baking is that the cutting prevents it from having uneven cracks. So you now cut the bread open, it can rise evenly, and it makes for a better looking bread, and it also helps it in that regard. So this will go into a 400 oven. Some recipes call for 350, 375. I find that 400 is very consistent. It'll bake for 40 to 45 minutes. There's some recipes that will put a melted butter and buttermilk wash on it right now. I don't find that that's needed. I find that the bread will come out nice and brown, and you want to bake it till it's brown. One of the new things that instead of just using a cake tester to kind of guess at that, is now you can use a thermometer, and you want the internal temperature of your bread, and this one is pretty close to, after 40 minutes, I can test it. It comes up to either like 195. So somewhere between 185 and 200 is what you want the internal temperature of the bread to be. The other thing that can be added as an addition is caraway seeds are sometimes added. Annie Brennan adds lemon zest to her bread. So there's some varieties, what you can do. And it's a favorite. It's a favorite of mine. And I think there's nothing better than making homemade Irish Sutter bread. Again, and it is quick. So more ingredients, takes a little bit longer, but you've got a nice bread that is wonderful warm, right out of the oven with Irish butter. It's also great with jam, and it makes wonderful toast the next morning. So whether it's a brown bread version or a white bread, white flour version, you've got a great Irish Sutter bread. And look at the recipes, explore. Maybe you've got one that's been passed down through your family and you want to add to it, or you want to continue with it. But these are great recipes to try out, and pick one that you really like and enjoy.
All right, hi everyone from Barry's Old School Irish. If we can do a round of applause for Sandy, that was awesome. These breads look amazing. They look so good. I mean, we make our own brown bread here at the pub, but I mean, I am a fan of the currants. So I will be making this at home and putting currants in my soda bread. We'll see if our kids like them, you know, the 3 little ones.
And I do need a recipe for you to take home, and I want that recipe that you have with the molasses in it.
All
I've
right.
never made a brown bread with the molasses.
Well, I will have to share that one with you too. We got it when we were in Ireland. Danny and I, we went for our honeymoon. We've been now 10 years. Oh my God, I don't know when it's gone. But we've been there, you know, we've been here for about 10 years, and yeah, we got it on our honeymoon while we were in Ireland. So that's awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in today. This has been an honor to be a part of this. So
And thank you very much for hosting.
Oh,
It's
of
wonderful
course.
to be able to have a great venue in order to do the demonstration and to continue with very last hours of Irish heritage.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Very welcome.
Okay. Are we up?
We're
Hi,
live at
folks.
Johnny's.
Live at Johnny's. Hi, we are some representatives of the local chapter of Cultus Cultori Éireann, the Irish Musicians Association, an international organization. So here we have Mark Ballard, Lydia Fanera, Ben Gearing, and myself, Ben Hockenberry. We'll be playing some Irish tunes, singing some Irish songs, and we host a bunch of sessions, which are a great way for folks to get together and play music together. Lessons, workshops, concerts, Kayleys, we do all the things. So get in touch with us through Facebook or through irishrochester.weebly.com. And we're here at Johnny's Irish Pub, a place where we host a excellent session the last Sunday of every month. We just had it a couple days ago. And we're really excited to be able to present from here. So first up, we're going to play some jigs. This is the Blackthorn Stick and the Cliffs of Moher.
Okay, so I'm gonna kick us off next with some reels. We just played a couple jigs. Now we're gonna play reels. Reels are kind of a fast type of tune in Irish music. People love to dance to them. So we're going to play 2 reels called Jimmy McGettrick's and The Glass of Beer. And Ben's going to help me out on this one. So. That'll work, right? Okay.
Great. Let's see. Get that there. So next up, I would like to sing an Irish song for you, one in the Irish language. The tradition that I sing in is called sean-nós, which is Irish for the old way. And it is a style of singing in which the song tells the story, and the emphasis is placed on the story. So you can play with pitch and rhythm and phrasing to get your emotional message across. And the story for tonight is a familiar one. It's the emigrants' lament for leaving their homeland. This song in particular is Ardy Cuan. Damen hen Ardy Cuan en sleeve taivaram bonne blangan dular kurt goglan agok deidafni agiso kokira ligiso elandu agiso Shema krita tram agis bruna Sheisha an chorek tatabun Aratingo garfishukun Velfishay an hirum win agus fair shame on shame again agus so cock here the so Irelandu agso Shima krita tram agus brunnak Dahamagum kata israv Dymar fylen ar chram intrav Smi a dyn diag ysrog fi'n slan Is can yn un hen dyfnach Agus o ceir agus o Irelandu agus o Shima krita tram agus brunach agus o ceir agus o Irelandu agus o Shima krita tram agus brunach.
Hello, this is a hammered dulcimer. It is not a traditional Irish instrument, but you can certainly play traditional Irish music on it. It dates back, we believe, about 3,000 years to Persia, and then spread both east and west from there. So there are various variations of this instrument in different countries. For instance, if you go to Germany or Switzerland, you would find a similar instrument called the hochbrett. In Greece, they have the cimbalom. And even in China, they have something, I'm sure I'm messing up this pronunciation, but the yangqing. So it is a member of the zither family, which basically means it's a wooden box with strings. And it is, as you can see, it's shaped like a trapezoid, so the higher notes are at the top, the lower notes are at the bottom. And unlike many stringed instruments where the larger the instrument is, the lower the range, with this one, they come in different sizes, but the larger ones just means you have a longer range. You can still play the soprano notes, but you also have more bass. So I will be playing, leading us in two reels, the Flowers of Edinburgh and the New Rigate Ship, or A Ship with Brand New Sails. Vincent.
Is it me again? Okay. All right. So I play the fiddle, and a lot of people ask, what's the difference between a fiddle and a violin? And the answer is, in the instrument, none. It's all in how you play it and the style of the music you're playing. So one thing that sets Irish fiddling, and Scottish fiddling for that matter, apart from other forms of violin playing is the ornaments. So we don't just play the music as it's written on the page. We like to add a lot of, let's see, some. So like cuts, which is like, or rolls, or slides to it, just to make it our own, so every musician is playing the tune differently. So I thought I would start off with a slower one because you can really hear ornamentation better in a slower song. So this is Mckechnie's Farewell. It's like maybe a march, maybe a polka, I don't know. We play it kind of march speed. So yeah, it's not a traditional fast reel. And then a more traditional fast reel, Julia Delaney, if you guys want to join in.
So, I'm gonna play a banjo for you. So this is a tenor banjo, 4-string banjo. You might have seen them before in jazz bands, like Tiger Rag sort of stuff. Those are usually tuned C-G-D-A, like a viola. This is tuned an octave lower than a fiddle in G-D-A-E, which means that I can play any tune a fiddler can play, only better, except not really. They're usually much better than me. It's played with a pick, and it's particularly characterized by playing triplets is really the thing that this guy named Barney McKenna in the band The Dubliners really made this instrument into a centerpiece of the Irish music tradition. Before that, it was mostly used as a backing instrument. It has a long history, actually, going back into the 19th century, from the time of minstrel shows going to Ireland, and the banjo became a thing around the world. There's a connection between America and Ireland through this instrument. For better or worse, there's that legacy of history with us. For this next set of tunes, we're going to do some slides, which are a type of tune from the southwest of Ireland, the Slieve Lucra area at the border of Limerick, Kerry, and Cork. These are fast jigs, and are traditionally played for set dancing, which is kind of like Irish square dancing, which Kathy Whitfield will be up later. She leads a great set dancing group every Wednesday when we're in better times, and we're looking forward to playing for dancing again. So this is the Two or More slide, Eileen O'Riordan's, and The Star Above the Garter. So again, we're Cultus Kilterry Aaron. Thanks again to Mark Ballard, Lydia Finera, Ben Gearing. I'm Ben Hockenberry. Thanks Jim Gilmore for organizing this. Johnny's for hosting us. Thanks Kristen. I'm waiting to hear her in the other room. You can't hear. And thanks a lot, everybody. And hope to see you at a session. Connect with us on Facebook, Rochester Irish Musicians Association.
One more to play now, or?
We have more time?
Like 2 minutes. Okay, we can do one more. Focus.
Give us one more, please.
Focus. Okay. Focus. What you got? The normal focus.
Belly doesn't.
All right. Lead us in.
Okay. How do they start?
That was beautiful, beautiful. Let's see if we can get this adjusted. Can you hear me now? Sounds better? Alrighty, well, I apologize, Cultus, for getting here a tad late. I caught in some traffic heading across town, but I know you're in good hands. I really appreciate you guys participating again this year. They've always been a treat, and they always play well. We've got our own Celtic woman here singing for us all the times. Lydia, thank you. Again, that was Cultus Kilterry Aaron live from Johnny's. So I've come here to thank them. Also, we want to thank Jessica and Danny Barry for hosting us over at Barry's Old School Irish. I apologize that the crack in the background was a little loud there, but you know, it's an Irish pub. We do what we can do as best as we can, and it is live. So that's what we're here for, and enjoying fun and entertainment and everybody's camaraderie in that regards. So what I'd like to do now is introduce to you our historical speaker. She is past president of the Irish American Cultural Institute. She is also the daughter of Owen Mckechnie, He received the Ancient Order of Hibernians highest award, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Award from the AOH. He founded the Irish American Cultural Institute. Deirdre McKiernan Hetzler, who's coming up now, she was the first president and founder of the Rochester chapter of that organization. And without any further ado, Deirdre, come on up and tell us a little something about Irish women. Thank you.
All right. Hello. Tonight, we're going to talk about some history. And as you know, history is usually written by the men, right? Or at least it has been in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, it's about exploits, right? Rebels, patriots, adventurers, and the like. But that's why it's called history, right? So tonight, because there is a preponderance of wonderful Irish women who have shaped history both in Ireland and in our country, and actually around the world. So you probably know a lot of them already, because there are many that are very famous. For example, Bridget, St. Bridget of Kildare, who was the abbess of, forgot my glasses were actually on me. Bridget was the abbess of a mixed gender monastery in County Kildare. So pretty much everybody knows her. She's one of the quote-unquote Irish Trinity. So we have then Grania Whale, which was Grania Niwalia, known in America as Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen who stood up to Queen Elizabeth. And of course, we have Catherine Macaulay, the founder of the Sisters of Mercy. And we have also the famous Countess Markievicz, one of the leaders in the Easter Rising in 1916, who was also, in 1918, elected to the British Parliament. The very first woman elected to Westminster was an Irish rebel. Don't you love it? And of course, she didn't take her seat because the rebels then were forming their own parliament in Ireland called Dáil, the Irish Parliament. And so we'll move on from those women to meet some others that you may or may not have heard of. And the first one that I want to talk about is Hannah Sheehy Skeffington. And there she is, okay? Now, Hannah was born in Kanturk, County Cork, where there's now a statue in her memory. But she came from a very interesting family. Her mother, really, she got her feminism from her mother, who insisted that it was just as important for the daughters to be educated as the sons. And she got her nationalism from her father, who actually was an MP involved in politics. So there's an old Irish expression saying, Brishan andukas treshuliv ankat, what's bred in the bone is going to come out. So Hannah had this passion to enfranchise women but also to free her country. And sometimes those were kind of in tension with each other because she had a lot on her plate. This lady had dabbled in a lot of things. So besides being a nationalist and a suffragette, she was a labor activist and very concerned about the people. So she also was an independent thinker and married another independent thinker who was introduced to her by none other than James Joyce, because James Joyce and Francis Skeffington were classmates. When they were married, though, they each took each other's names, and that's where the Sheehy Skeffington comes from. They were hosts for evening meetings, just as her family had been, where people could drop in and talk about politics or whatever's going on in the world, so forth. So she and Francis started the first of several newspapers and got themselves in trouble periodically. Because of her outspoken attitudes about suffrage, she was in opposition to the Irish political party. So I guess some articles she wrote ended her in jail because of that opposition. Wasn't the last time she was going to have that experience. And following that, shortly after they started that first of many papers, Francis was arrested and went to jail because he had spoken out against conscription. Now, we all know what that is, and the British were trying to enlist Irish in the armies because war had already been declared. He was not going to cooperate with that. He said that he was a pacifist, as was his wife. I am willing to die for Ireland, but not to kill for Ireland. Then, of course, the following year, we have the Easter Rising, 1916. They were not involved as pacifists, but Francis was downtown Dublin trying to keep people from looting and also trying to help the wounded. So he was scooped up by some British soldiers and imprisoned. Well, within 24 hours or so, one of those soldiers decided in some extrajudicial killings. Francis was murdered in custody, but poor Hannah knew nothing about all of this. So it took a long time for her to find out what happened. She refused the compensation that the government offered because she had to pursue some other ideas. Somehow or other, she slipped out of the country and went on a speaking tour of the States and told her story, told about British militarism as she knew it. So one of the papers, if I don't have lights on my notes, so I hope I can read this. One of the comments from one of the press releases following her talks said, "Those present were simply amazed at the wonderful poise and self-control of the speaker as she told stories perpetrated by the military authorities in Dublin that made the audience gasp with horror." So she joined Sinn Féin, an Irish political party that was just beginning, and it means we ourselves, although it's often translated as we, us alone, but it's we ourselves, and she joined that party. and went on to establish, actually she established lots of different groups for workers, for women workers, for women's suffrage, and then after the Rising established a fund for prisoners, the Prisoners Defense League. So after the Civil War, when the people in favor of the treaty had won the Civil War, and I'll say more about that later, De Valera, as the head of the government, imprisoned quite a few of his, sorry, that came later. There were quite a few prisoners rounded up after the war, and so she was all about raising funds for them. Crossed into Northern Ireland as a part of that, only she had been banned from Northern Ireland, so she ended up in jail again. So she had also had ended up in another confrontation with authority in a jail in England. So she was a member of the Dublin Corporation, the governance of the city of Dublin for a while, and opposed, there was a bill that was put in the Irish Parliament in 1935, a labor bill, that it was going to disenfranchise women in the jobs. So she fought that. She also fought De Valera's 1937 Constitution because it also was seen as disenfranchising women. And it pretty much did. I mean, he talked about comely maidens home raising children, you know, that. So that was kind of the end of her active life, shall we say. She tried once more in the early 40s to run for the Dáil and was defeated, and she died in Dublin in 1946. So then we move on to another rebel lady, Kathleen Daley Clark, who came from an extremely nationalist family in County Limerick. I am having a little trouble checking things here with the lighting. So her father died young, and his brother had been in the failed 1867 Fenian Rising against the British. So John Daley was in prison in England, and just happened to share a cell with a man named Thomas Clark. But after her dad died, Kathleen's Uncle John pretty much stood in for him and the family. And after Clark was released from jail at 1899, he came to visit the Daleys. He'd been awarded the Freedom of Limerick and had come to Limerick to receive the award, was invited to stay with the Daleys, stayed for a few weeks, and you hadn't heard that like fish and company smell after 3 days, as the old saying goes. But Uncle John then decided it would be a good idea to rent a lodge at the sea and invite Tom to join the whole family. Well, you know where this is leading, don't you? So family wasn't terribly keen on this idea of the two of them getting together, Tom and Kathleen, because, you know, he was much older and he was penniless and he hadn't a job. But he went to New York, and according to her biographical notes, must have become a citizen, because she makes reference to that. She follows him to New York, pre-planned, of course. They were married there in 1901 and joined every imaginable Irish group that was going. Clan na Gael, the Gaelic Athletic Association, the Gaelic League, which is where my father learned his Irish, actually. So they bought a farm on Long Island, but things in Europe were beginning to heat up. So by 1907, Tom had persuaded her that they needed to go back to Ireland because he was anticipating that it was going to be time in the near future for another strike for Irish freedom. So eventually she consented. She said, you know, you've already paid your price. Do you really want to go back to more trouble? But they went back with their young son. Well, I think young Daley was probably 5 by then. And they bought a little shop in Dublin and eventually expanded to 2 shops. They were tobacconists, news, you know, that kind of thing. But Tom was busy networking with anybody who thought the way they did about Irish freedom. So he was part of, again, any Irish organization going that was leading gradually to a nationalist feeling, because up until then, the Irish pretty much had become lethargic. That was like, we've tried and failed so often, you know, I guess we'll just keep going the way we are. So these nationalist things like the Gaelic Athletic Association and Gaelic League were beginning to turn that tide so that people were beginning to think more along the lines of Irish freedom. So at that point, there was home rule. There was a home rule bill had been passed after the third try to get home rule for Ireland, 1914. And the Unionists in the northeast of the country were very unhappy. So they brought in guns to drill because they were going to fight their own government if home rule was allowed. So the Irish Republican Brotherhood and had kind of developed Irish volunteers. So they figured if the Unionists can drill with guns, so can we. And the Brits can't stop us because they're allowing it up north. So they actually were able to get some guns in, and they drilled. And around that time, Kathleen formed the Central Branch. She was one of the co-founders of the women's organization, kind of like the Women's Auxiliary for the volunteers, called Cumann na Ban. And they also learned to use rifles, and they practiced first aid. Well, we all know what happened in Easter 1916. The rebels lasted a full week, which nobody thought, under the circumstances, some counterintelligence had been sent, and so they didn't get the turnout they expected. Anyway, you know, Tom Clark had signed the proclamation. His was the first name on the Proclamation for Irish Freedom, which granted equal everything to men and women, contrary to what happened later with Dev. But they were, as you know, the leaders were rounded up and executed. But before the rebellion started, the Irish Republican Brotherhood and volunteers had voted that somebody needed to have everything, all their plans and ideas, so that if anything happened to them, their work could be carried on. And they voted Kathleen should do that. So she had to memorize everything and memorize the names, because if there was anything on paper, what would have happened, right? Anyway, her husband was the first one to be executed. And within a week, she had established the volunteer fund for the widows and for those who had fought, whose husbands had or brothers had been carted off to jail in England. Now, she lost both her husband and her only brother in that execution. So, Kathleen she was active in Sinn Féin, was also on the Dublin Corporation governing board, and had done a couple of tours talking, again slipped out of the country. So she was jailed in Holloway Prison in London with, of all people, Countess Markievicz, and also another widow, Maud Gon McBride. Her husband, Sean McBride, had been one of the ones who was executed, and they are memorialized in a poem by by Yeats. So she was elected several years later as Lord Mayor of Dublin, the very first woman to be elected Lord Mayor. And the first thing she did was to make sure that Queen Victoria's huge portrait was gotten rid of, along with those of other British royalty, and the trappings of what she called the colonial trappings. So the chain and insignia for the Lord Mayor, she refused to put on. They had to make a new one for her. So she lived a very long and very productive life. So I won't go into some of the rest of all the things that she did. She also fought against the Constitution for the same reasons that Hannah had done. Eventually moved to London to live with her youngest son, but she lived to 94 in spite of her poor health. Could I possibly have my water bottle, please? Thank you. Thanks. Now, the next two women I'm going to talk about were poor Irish immigrants who made their mark on America, as many poor immigrants have done for our country. In 1818, Margaret Gaffney and her family emigrated to the United States, but it wasn't very long before her parents died in a yellow fever epidemic. So she was left penniless and orphaned. There was one sibling who had survived but disappeared. She never saw him again. But somebody that they had met on the boat took her in, but as household help. At least it kept her alive and fed and really well cared for, except no schooling. She didn't learn to read or write. But 1935, she met another Irish immigrant and married. His name was Charles Haughey. And the next year they had a baby girl. They moved from the middle Atlantic states to New Orleans in the hopes of finding a little better, a warmer climate for him, because he wasn't well. But within a few months, the baby died. He went home to Ireland and died almost as soon as he got there. So there she was again, penniless and alone. So, but she took in washing and got then a job in a laundry, and eventually a laundry in a convent orphanage. She saved every penny and bought a cart and a couple of cows, which she milked, and sold the, took the cart around town with the milk and sold it, gave the sisters a part of all her earnings, then eventually acquired quite a few cows, moved on to become the head of the convent's herd. Again, very, very, very smart businesswoman, very careful with her money, and most of it went to charity. So, and I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm going to condense this next little bit a little. There was a yellow fever epidemic. She was around nursing everybody. It didn't matter to her what color you were, what church you went to, or none. She took care of the orphans. When she nursed the mothers in the yellow fever epidemic, she assured them that she would take care of their children, and she did. Eventually, she had started 4 different orphanages and left quite a large sum of money to all the orphanages. She apparently left a bakery business, which she had loaned money to a baker, and he went bankrupt, and she took over the big bakery and made quite a thing of it. Had the first steam-powered engine for business in the South. So she was so well known then for the bread, which she practically donated. She became the bread woman of New Orleans, and at her funeral, the pallbearers were some of the lieutenant governors and so forth. What I need to do now, because I am running out of time, Mother Jones was the next one I was going to talk about, a very important labor organizer, once called the most dangerous woman in America because of her labor activity. So look her up, Mother Jones. And the last one I wanted to talk about was, at least to bring your attention to, Mary Lenahan Maccalis, the 8th president of Ireland and the first woman to succeed as president other women presidents. So she was born in a suburb, a nationalist area of Belfast, and the family was driven out by the violence. Went on to earn a law degree and teach both in Queen's University in Belfast and in in Dublin and Trinity. Again, because of the time constraints, I'm going to fast forward to the very end, because I love this story of Mary Maccalis. Her 2 presidential terms were devoted to unifying, devoted to the poor and non-sectarianism, and had even done a lot of public speaking, got in a heck of a lot of trouble because she took communion in a Protestant cathedral as a part of a program she was involved in, celebrated the 4th of July in the presidential home. Again, then after she was all done with that, went back to school and got a canon law degree, and has been a thorn in the side of the Catholic Church from time to time over that. She spoke out at the time of Pope Francis's Synod on the Family, and this is what she had to say: that that there were no experts. Imagine getting a bunch of old men together to talk about something they knew nothing about. So this is what she said: have any of them ever changed a baby's nappy? You know what that is? A diaper. For me, that is the important question, because it is one thing to say that we all grew up in families and had mothers and fathers, but it's a very different thing to raise a gay son, which she did. A very different thing to live daily in a relationship and to police the relationships between our children and the world. And she is now teaching in Glasgow. So, thank you.
I'm shaking to start video.
And here we go. So I made it over to Mckechnie's Irish pub, just down in the west side of Rochester. I got here in time. So I would like to thank Deirdre McKiernan-Hetzler for her wonderful talk about Irish women and the history of that. And so now we're coming to you again live from Mckechnie's restaurant in Greece, New York. And what we have is the final segment of our program, and that is Kathy Whitfield of the Rinkin Irish Dance Studio. And she is going to give you a big demonstration of Irish dancing, you know, not just the typical thing you'll see on St. Patrick's Day of high stepping and high kicking. And I think she's got a very good program to offer. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Whitfield, and I have a dance school here in Rochester, Rinkin Irish Dancing. It's a non-competitive dance school. And we're here at Mckechnie's in Rochester, which is the official dance floor for our Daleys. Unfortunately, we're not having them now, obviously, but hopefully we will very soon. So I'm going to take you on a very quick tour, about 15 minutes, a quick tour of Irish step dance history. There are many different forms of Irish step dancing, and some of them look very, very different from each other. So I'm just going to show you 3 different styles of Irish step dancing through the centuries and give you some idea of why they changed the way that they did. So we're going to start back at the very earliest mention of dancing in Ireland is probably in the 1500s, if you go back to the literature. And this would be a mention here, a mention there. We don't know exactly what they were doing, but we do know that the entertainment of the time was the house dance. People would gather in each other's houses and they would dance and tell stories and have a bit of the crack. So it was a social event. And dancing at that time was meant to be a social activity. It wasn't for performance, it wasn't for competition, it was a social activity. So they would do group dances called country sets, which are very similar to American square dances. And at some point, you would have step dancers come out. Everybody would gather around, take a break, step dancers, of course, and people would come out and dance one at a time, the step dancing of the time. Now, a lot of times they didn't have much of a floor to dance on. In most people's houses, they had a dirt floor. So they would take the door off the hinges, either the whole door, or if they had one of those half doors where the top and the bottom open separately, they would usually take the top off and put it on the floor, and that was the dance floor. So it was a very small space that people had to dance in. So it wasn't like you were flying around a big stage or anything. You were in a very small space. So the steps were made to fit in a very small space, and they were very low to the floor. And one of the biggest things about this oldest style of step dancing is that it was improvised. So the dancer decided what steps they wanted to do. It wasn't taught by a teacher. You didn't go to a dance class to learn it. You learned it at these house dances. You learned it from other dances. You kind of absorbed it by osmosis, kind of. So the dancers would get up to dance one at a time, and nowadays we call this oldest style seamsah dancing. That means old style in Irish. Now, of course, at the time they didn't call it old style. That was just the step dancing of the time. From now on, I'm going to call it seamsah to differentiate it from the other forms of step dancing that I'm going to talk about. So I would like to show you a little bit of what this looks like. All of these dances are very brief. I just want to give you an idea. And about the house dances here. Oh yes, there's one more thing. They also met at crossroads. Sometimes people from different villages would meet at a crossroads to dance. So not just within a town or a village, they would also meet up with other villages at a crossroads. And sometimes they would erect platforms at these crossroads to keep the dancers up out of the dirt and the mud. And some of those platforms are still out there, and you can go and find them and dance on them if you visit Ireland. So a little bit of sean-nós dancing. So that was what we now call sean-nós dancing. Edwina Guckian, who did so much to resurrect sean-nós dancing in Leitrim, she says that they used to call it single turn dancing. People would get up to dance the single turn. So obviously the terminology has changed because now this is a different kind of dancing. So. Okay, so now we're going to move along to our middle section here, and this is where we have the rise of the traveling dance master. So remember I told you that sean-nós dancing was not taught by teachers. So you didn't go to a dance class to learn it, you didn't go to a dance teacher. So now we have the traveling dance masters. Now you do have a dance teacher, although you don't specifically class. The traveling dance masters would work on a circuit, and they would go from one village to another, and they were given room and board by the people who lived there. And they would teach dancing to the adults and the children usually. Actually, more likely the adults. Very interesting that a number of dance teachers in the older times didn't want to teach children. They preferred to teach adults. So the biggest change with this next style I'm going to show you is that it is choreographed. What I just did, that was improvised. So the dancer can decide what steps they want to do. They can change their mind in the middle of it, but that makes it kind of hard for a group of people to do it. If you want to do a routine and you want a group of people to do the same dances, then you really need something choreographed. So in this part of history, right, easily the 1700s and definitely by the middle of the 1700s, the traveling dance masters were very well established, and they taught a choreographed style of dance. So because it was choreographed, you had a group of people who knew the dances. And so that group of people could dance together in a way that you couldn't do with the older sean-nós style. So we have more performance coming in here because performance was now possible. It was more possible than the improvised style. And we also see the rise of step dancing as a social activity. Step dancing nowadays is aimed at performance and competition. Actually, the other way around, it's really aimed at competition and then performance. But Step dancing used to be a social activity. It was something that you would get up and do at a ceilidh. The same way that nowadays we get up and we do a country set, like a reel set, or we would get up and do the Walls of Limerick. People would get up and dance one of these newly choreographed dances that lots of people knew. So if you had a bunch of people at a house dance or a crossroads dance, you knew maybe Pickens or the Little Dutch dance, they would get up and form a circle and they would all do this dance together. Not as a formal performance, certainly not as a competition, but just as a social activity. And that's something that we've really lost with step dancing nowadays. But the next dance I'm going to do for you, a little piece of it actually, is called Single Time. And it's from the Dan Fury repertoire. Dan Fury was from Labashida, and he taught Michael and Celine Tuberty, who've done so much to publish and to teach Dan Fury's repertoire. And this is kind of a middle ground between the older Sheno style and the modern style that we know today. The steps are not going to look a whole lot different to you than what I just did. The main difference is that it's choreographed. So a group of people could do this. The steps are still low to the floor. It can still be done in a very small space, although it does move around a little bit more. The arms, everybody always asks about the arms in Irish dancing. The arms are at the sides, but they're not held there. So they can swing a little bit in ways that you certainly couldn't do with modern dancing now. So I might as well go after the arms now, because the arms are the big question that everybody asks about Irish dancing. Why on earth do you hold your arms so stiffly at your sides? Well, we didn't always. We didn't always hold our arms down like that. There are lots of references in the literature to Irish dancers using their arms in, a few centuries ago, not now. And the women in particular had to use their arms because they had to pick up their skirts and put them on their hips, otherwise they would trip. The men also held their hands on their hips. And at one point, who knows when, one of those arms went down and there was only one arm on the hip. And that continued up until the 1940s and 50s, later than we might think based on the way step dancing is now. And there are lots of stories about why the arms went down, why that last arm went down from the one arm up there. Some people blame it on a priest who told women that they looked suggestive when they were holding their hands on their hips and told them to take their hands off their hips. Some people point to British soldiers during the penal laws when it was difficult to participate in Irish culture. It was either frowned upon or it was downright illegal. It said that people took their hands off their hips, held them down, so that when they were dancing, the British soldiers looked through the windows of their homes, they would not think that they were dancing because their arms were held down. John Cullinan, who is a renowned Irish dance historian, says he recalls an adjudicator sometime in the 1930s or 40s objecting to the practice of one hand on the hip. It's at that point, it was mainly the slip jig that was danced that way. And he said an adjudicator told a dancer to take her hand off her hip. He didn't like that. So Cullinan thinks it was a way for teachers to make their students stand out in competition. Any or all of those could be good. Any of those could have contributed to it. Who knows? Anyway, this is a little piece of a jig called Single Time. so for our last bit, we get to the modern step dancing that we know. The Gaelic League, which was founded in 1893, had as its mission the advancement of Irish culture, language, dance, music. They formed an Irish Dance Commission in 1930, and the Gaelic League threw its weight behind the newest styles of Irish dance. It was felt that those reflected better on the Irish. The newer styles were much more intricate, much more difficult. And it was felt that it made the Irish look more sober, more serious, more intellectually proper. It made the Irish look better. So they threw their weight behind the newer styles. And the church got in on this too. Churches in general don't like dancing. And the church really didn't like the older forms of dancing. It was felt that those older forms of dancing, which were aimed at social interaction, well, maybe there was a little bit too much social interaction going on. So all of these forces converged in the 1935 Dance Hall Act. And the Dance Hall Act said that you could not hold a dance unless you had a license. So that basically wiped out all the house dances, which are still in existence, all the crossroads dances. Now you had to have a license. Your average person cannot afford a license. And even if they could, the people who granted the license, well, they want you to do a particular kind of dancing. So now dances had to take place in licensed dance halls, and you could only dance the kind of dances that they wanted you to dance, the people who ran those dance halls, and that would be the newer styles of dance. So the older styles almost died out. And Rena Duckian in Leitrim talks about her grandfather. She had to go to her grandfather to learn Sheehy-am-sah steps because her parents never learned those. They grew up in the era of the Dance Hall Act. So there were no house dances where you learned to do Sheehy-am-sah dancing. She also talks about her grandfather saying that they used to pay a lookout when they would have illegal house dances. And the lookout would warn everybody if the Garda, the police were coming. And then the musicians would quickly put their instruments away and everybody would take out their rosaries and they would pretend to be playing the rosary if the Garda came in. But fortunately, the people of Ireland decided they liked their older styles and they were resurrected in the 80s, and 90s. So now all the various forms of Irish dancing are danced and taught all over Ireland, in the States, here in Rochester, basically all over the world. It's a really big smorgasbord to pick from. So the last couple steps I'm going to do are the modern style. That's the straightest, stiffest, most formal style. There's your whirlwind tour through Irish dance history. I want to thank the AOH for having me and Mckechnie for hosting us. It's been a good time. Remember, look for different styles of Irish dancing. There's not just one style.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kathy. That was a great rendition and history lesson for all of us. I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of that aspect of the Irish dance. They're too used to Michael Flatley and the rest of the gang and such, kicking their heels up and things of that nature for show, and not so much for socializing. Of course, we're social distancing now, but we always try and hope for a better future, right? And that'll be coming soon, I'm sure. And a couple things that I think one of them is that I chaperoned some Catholic school dances and such, and you always have to leave room for the Holy Spirit. You know? The second thing is you know, a lot of Irish came over, worked the mines and such in Appalachian. So you see a lot of, in my opinion, similarities to clogging and the other aspects, which I'm sure, you know, raise their roots and things of that nature in Irish dancing and that. But that's more my opinion. I haven't done a lot of research in that regards. But this concludes our almost of Irish American Heritage Month. Apologize. Again, a proclamation in Rochester. This is the 6th year that we've had locals proclaim Irish American Heritage Month. And it's the 31st year the United States President has declared Irish American Heritage Month. So these proclamations are important, keeps our culture alive. In addition, teaches the world and everything else about how much Irish and Irish Americans have done for this country, from the beginnings of the Declaration of Independence to digging the Erie Canal here through Rochester, Monroe County, and everything else involved that you've probably seen on various presentations as this month has you know, shown you, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So again, on behalf of Barry's Old School Irish Pub, Johnny's Irish Pub, and Mckechnie's Restaurant and Pub, we'd like to thank everybody for attending today and watching on Zoom and YouTube. If you know anybody that would like to see it, it'll be available online, so you can always send it to your friends, family, and neighbors. At this point, I'd like to thank you very much, and Shee-am-sah.